11-year-old Zoe Lewis told her fifth-grade class the truth. Her mother was a Navy SEAL. The laughter was immediate and merciless. Her teacher said women don't do that. The principal called it attention-seeking. And soon Officer Brent Carter was smirking as he arrested Amara Lewis for stolen valor, certain he'd exposed a fraud. A video of Zoe's claim went viral. The mockery spread nationwide, and everyone was convinced this quiet black woman and her daughter were liars. But what none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly imagine as they built their case and prepared for court, was that Amara Lewis had spent years in the shadows saving lives no one would ever know about, and the team of warriors she'd served with had been watching everything. Today, that courtroom was about to discover exactly what happens when you call a SEAL a liar. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning air was crisp as 11-year-old Zoe Lewis walked toward Riverside Elementary School, her backpack bouncing against her small frame with each step. The bag looked almost comically oversized on her, stuffed with textbooks and a lunch her mother had carefully packed before dawn. Zoe's face carried that particular expression of determination that children wear when they're trying to appear braver than they feel. Near the school's flagpole, 3 older veterans gathered in their familiar ritual, preparing to raise the American flag. Mr. Patterson, a Vietnam vet with silver hair and kind eyes, smiled as Zoe approached. "Morning, Zoe," he called out warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Patterson," Zoe replied, stopping to watch them work. "My mom used to do this in the Navy. She said it was one of the most important parts of her day." The veterans exchanged gentle smiles. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mr. Patterson said. "Your mother sounds like a fine person." "She is," Zoe said proudly, then hurried toward the school entrance. What Zoe didn't see were the knowing glances the veterans shared, the way they nodded to each other with understanding. They'd learned long ago that children often embellish their parents' accomplishments, turning simple military service into grand adventures. It was innocent enough. Inside Mrs. Keene's fifth-grade classroom, the walls were decorated with red, white, and blue streamers in preparation for the upcoming Veterans Day assembly. Students chatted noisily as they settled into their seats, the excited energy of pre-holiday anticipation filling the air. Mrs. Keene, a pleasant woman in her 40s with reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose, clapped her hands for attention. "All right, class, settle down. Today we're going to start our Veterans Day projects. I want each of you to think about veterans you know or have learned about." Hands shot up around the room. Tyler Mitchell called out without waiting to be recognized. "My grandpa was in the Army." "That's wonderful, Tyler," Mrs. Keene acknowledged. "Who else?" Zoe's hand went up slowly. When Mrs. Keene nodded at her, she spoke clearly. "My mom was in the Navy. She's a SEAL." The classroom went silent for a beat, then erupted in snickers and giggles. Mrs. Keene's expression shifted to something between embarrassment and pity. "Honey," she said, her voice taking on that particular tone adults use when they're trying to correct a child gently. "Women don't do that. Maybe your mom was in the Navy, but she couldn't have been a SEAL." "But she was," Zoe insisted, feeling her cheeks grow hot. "She told me about her missions and everything." More laughter rippled through the classroom. Jake Henderson, an 8th grader who'd been held back and towered over everyone else, snorted loudly. "Yeah, right, and my mom's an astronaut." "That's enough," Mrs. Keene said, though she was fighting back her own awkward smile. "Zoe, we'll talk about this later. For now, let's move on." Zoe sank into her seat, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. She'd learned from her mother that tears were private things, not weapons or shields to use in public. But the humiliation felt like fire in her chest. The morning dragged on with agonizing slowness. By lunchtime, Zoe had already been called to Principal Harris's office. She sat in the chair across from his massive desk, her feet barely touching the floor, while he reviewed a note from Mrs. Keene. Principal Harris was a stern-faced man in his 50s with thinning hair and a perpetually tired expression. He looked at Zoe over the rim of his reading glasses. "Zoe, Mrs. Keene tells me you were disrupting class today with some rather fanciful stories about your mother." "They're not stories," Zoe said quietly. "They're true." "Young lady," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I understand that sometimes children want their parents to seem more exciting than they are. But lying is a serious matter. It's attention-seeking behavior, and we can't have that in our school. I'm not lying. I'm going to have to call your mother and discuss this with her. If this behavior continues, we may need to take further action." Zoe bit her lip, knowing her mother would hate being dragged into school drama. Amara Lewis valued privacy above almost everything else. The idea of Principal Harris calling her made Zoe's stomach twist with guilt and anxiety. "Can I go now?" she asked. "Yes, but think about what we discussed." That evening, Amara Lewis sat at her kitchen table, carefully cleaning her daughter's scraped knuckles. Zoe had come home with bloodied hands and a rip in her jeans, evidence of a playground altercation she'd barely explained. Amara's movements were precise and gentle, each dab of antiseptic applied with the same focused care she'd once used in field medicine. "You want to tell me what happened?" Amara asked, her voice calm but firm. "Some kids were saying things," Zoe mumbled. "About you or about me?" Zoe looked up, surprised by her mother's perception. "About you. They said I was lying about you being a SEAL." Amara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her hands never stopped their careful work. "And you defended me with your fists." "I defended the truth." For a moment, Amara's eyes softened. She finished bandaging Zoe's knuckles, then cupped her daughter's face gently. "Listen to me, baby. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Strength doesn't shout. Real strength is quiet. It's knowing who you are even when nobody else believes it." "But it's not fair," Zoe protested. "Why won't they believe me?" "Because people have small imaginations," Amara said simply. "They can't picture what they've never seen. That's their limitation, not yours. Don't you want them to know the truth?" Amara's expression grew distant for a moment, as if she were looking at something far away that only she could see. "The truth isn't for everyone, Zoe. Some truths are just for us." Before Zoe could respond, Amara's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, and Zoe saw something flicker across her mother's face. Not quite worry, but certainly alertness. "Go start your homework," Amara said. "I need to take this." Zoe reluctantly headed to her room but left her door cracked open. She heard her mother's voice drop to that particular tone she used sometimes, crisp and professional. "This is Lewis." "Yes, ma'am." "Understood." "When?" "I can be there in 40 minutes. "No, it won't be a problem." Zoe caught fragments of words that made her pulse quicken. "Recon. Classified. Situation assessment." These weren't the words of someone who'd simply served in the Navy years ago. These were the words of someone still connected to that world. When Amara ended the call, she stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring out the window into the darkening evening. Zoe watched her mother's reflection in the glass and saw something she rarely glimpsed. The soldier beneath the single mother. The warrior hidden inside the woman who packed lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences. The next day at school was worse. Word had spread about Zoe's claims, amplified by social media and whispered conversations. During recess, a group of older kids formed a circle around her near the basketball courts. Jake Henderson led the group, his phone held up to record. "Hey everyone, it's Soldier Girl. Tell us more about your mom's secret missions." "Leave me alone," Zoe said, trying to push past them. "What's wrong?" taunted Madison Phillips, a popular eighth grader with a cruel smile. Your imaginary SEAL mom can't save you. My mom is real and she did serve, Zoe shot back. Just because you can't believe it doesn't make it false. Prove it, Jake challenged. Show us a picture of her in one of those uniforms. She doesn't keep those pictures around. A lot of what she did was classified. This brought fresh waves of laughter. Classified, Madison repeated mockingly. Oh, that's convenient. My mom's a superhero, but all the evidence is classified. Zoe felt her fists clenching again, but she remembered her mother's words. Strength doesn't shout. Instead, she looked Jake dead in the eye and said something she'd heard her mother say once during a phone call. If you ever need real help, don't call my mom. She won't come for liars and bullies. The cryptic statement confused them enough that their mockery faltered. But Jake recovered quickly, shoving his phone closer to Zoe's face. This is going straight to social media. Everyone's going to see what a liar you are. That's when Officer Brent Carter arrived. The school resource officer was a white man in his late 30s with the kind of swagger that came from wearing a badge in a small town where nothing much ever happened. He'd heard the commotion and strolled over with his thumbs hooked in his belt. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The older kids immediately scattered, leaving Zoe standing alone. Jake, however, was eager to tell his version of events. "Officer Carter, this girl keeps saying her mom is a Navy SEAL. She's like totally making it up and causing problems." Carter's eyebrows rose with amusement. He looked down at Zoe with barely concealed skepticism. "That true, kid? Your mom's a SEAL?" "Yes, sir," Zoe said, lifting her chin defiantly. Carter actually laughed, a short bark of disbelief. "A SEAL? What's next? Your mom flies spaceships, wrestles alligators?" "She served her country with honor," Zoe said, her voice shaking but steady. "Sir." "Listen, sweetheart," Carter said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I've met plenty of military folks. SEALs are the best of the best. They're not—" He paused, his eyes scanning Zoe in a way that made her feel small. "They're not usually women, and definitely not single moms in towns like this. You don't know my mother. Maybe not, but I know stolen valor when I hear it. That's a serious accusation you're making. Come on, you're coming with me to the station. We're going to call your mom and straighten this out." "I didn't do anything wrong," Zoe protested as Carter took her arm. "Disrupting the peace, making false claims about military service. That's plenty wrong." The walk to Officer Carter's patrol car felt like a death march. Students watched from windows and doorways, some filming on their phones. Zoe kept her head high, channeling every ounce of her mother's quiet strength. But inside she was terrified. Not of the police station, but of disappointing her mother, of dragging her into the spotlight she'd worked so hard to avoid. At the station, Zoe sat in a hard plastic chair while Carter made a show of calling her mother. "Yeah, we've got your daughter here. Seems she's been telling some pretty wild stories. You might want to come down and collect her." 45 minutes later, the station door opened and Amara Lewis walked in. She moved with the kind of fluid efficiency that most people wouldn't notice. Her civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple navy blue sweater, giving no hint of her past. But everything about her posture, the way she assessed the room in a single glance, the controlled economy of her movements, spoke of military training to anyone who knew what to look for. Officer Carter didn't know what to look for. He saw a black woman in her mid-30s, attractive but unremarkable, and his smirk deepened. "Ms. Lewis?" he asked, not bothering to stand. "Commander Lewis," Amara corrected quietly, her eyes finding Zoe across the room. She gave her daughter a slight nod that said, "I've got this." Carter's smirk widened. "Commander, huh? Look, ma'am, I'm going to need to see some ID. Your daughter's been making some serious claims." Amara reached into her wallet and produced her military credentials. Carter took them, examining them with exaggerated thoroughness. His expression shifted from amusement to suspicion. "These could be fake. he said, tossing them back on the desk. You can get anything printed online these days. Amara's eyes, which had been calm, now held something cold and sharp. She stepped closer to Carter, invading his space just enough to make him instinctively lean back. If you're questioning authenticity, she said, her voice dropping to a register that made everyone in the station stop what they were doing, I can arrange a call with your superior, or with the Naval Special Warfare Command, or perhaps you'd like to contact the Pentagon directly. I have several numbers I could provide. Carter's face reddened. Now hold on, I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said, officer. You assumed that because of what I look like, because I'm a woman, because I'm a mother living in a quiet town, that my service couldn't be real. You dismissed my daughter, humiliated her, and brought her here based on your own prejudice. That's not what this is about, Carter blustered, but his confidence had evaporated. Then what is it about? Amara asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Because from where I'm standing, you've detained a minor for telling the truth. The desk sergeant, an older officer who'd been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, cleared his throat. Carter, maybe we should just... We're done here, Amara said. Zoe, come on. As mother and daughter walked toward the door, Carter called out, trying to salvage some authority. This isn't over. You can't just... Amara turned back, and the look she gave him made his words die in his throat. It was the look of someone who'd faced down actual enemies, who'd made life-and-death decisions in the dark corners of the world. Carter, for all his bluster, recognized in that moment that he was completely out of his depth. Yes, Amara said simply. It is. Outside, as they walked to Amara's modest sedan, Zoe finally let her composure crack. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble. You didn't. Cause anything, baby. They did. Amara unlocked the car, but before they got in, she noticed something that made her entire body tense. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked across the street, its engine running. It had been there when they arrived, and it was still there now. Amara had clocked it immediately upon entering the station, had noted its model and position, and the slight movement behind the darkened glass. As they pulled out of the parking lot, the SUV followed at a careful distance. Mom? Zoe asked nervously, seeing her mother's eyes flick to the rearview mirror. Is someone following us? Amara's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, we're going to be fine. But Zoe saw her mother's hands grip the steering wheel tighter, saw the way her eyes kept checking the mirrors with tactical precision. The past her mother had tried so hard to leave behind wasn't just circling back. It was closing in. Over the next several days, the video of Zoe claiming her mother was a SEAL went viral. It had been edited, of course, cut to make Zoe look foolish and delusional. The local news picked it up as a funny moment, running it during their lighter segments with chuckling anchors making jokes about overactive imaginations. The comments online were brutal. Another case of stolen valor. Sad that parents teach their kids to lie like this. Someone call CPS, this child needs help. Amara watched one segment in silence, her face completely unreadable. Zoe sat beside her on the couch, tears streaming down her face. Make it stop, Mom. Please just tell them the truth. The truth isn't theirs to know, Amara said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. The next day, Principal Harris called Amara into his office. He sat behind his desk with the uncomfortable air of a man who'd decided to make a difficult decision and was determined to see it through. Ms. Lewis, I'm going to be direct with you. This situation has gotten out of hand. The video, the media attention, it's becoming a distraction for our entire school. Then perhaps you should have handled it differently from the start, Amara replied coolly. My daughter told the truth and was punished for it. I'm not here to debate what is or isn't true, Harris said, shuffling papers nervously. I'm here to find a solution. I think if you could just clarify the situation, perhaps explain that there was a misunderstanding. You're asking me to lie. I'm asking you to consider what's best for your daughter. The other students are merciless. She's being bullied constantly. If you could just help us put this to rest." Amara leaned forward, her eyes locked on Harris. "You're asking me to lie to make you comfortable, to make those bullies comfortable, to validate their prejudice and their cruelty. And you're framing it as concern for my daughter." Harris's face flushed. "Ms. Lewis, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate being called in, here to be told that the truth is negotiable. We're done." "Not quite," Harris said, regaining some of his administrative authority. "I'm suspending Zoe for 3 days for instigating misinformation and creating a hostile environment." "You're suspending her for being honest?" "I'm suspending her for causing disruption. If this pattern continues, we'll have to consider more permanent solutions." Amara stood slowly, her movements controlled despite the fury radiating from her. "You do what you think you need to do, Mr. Harris. But understand this. My daughter will not be made to feel ashamed for telling the truth. Not by you, not by anyone." When Amara arrived to collect Zoe from school that afternoon, Officer Carter was there, for safety, as he put it. He leaned against the wall near the main office, or sat smirking when he saw Amara approaching. "Didn't think SEALs handled PTA meetings," he called out, loud enough for others to hear. Amara stopped walking and turned to face him. She didn't raise her voice, didn't show any visible anger. She simply stepped close enough that Carter could feel the intensity radiating from her. "You're right," she said quietly. "SEALs typically handle more important things, like knowing when they're making a mistake they'll regret." Carter tried to maintain his bravado, but he involuntarily took a step backward. The movement was small but noticeable, and the administrative assistant behind the desk watched with wide eyes. That night, Zoe's composure finally shattered completely. She stood in the living room, tears streaming down her face, her voice rising with frustration and hurt. "Why won't you just show them, Mom? Show them you're real. Show them your medals or your uniform or something. Make them believe you." Amara, who'd been standing at the window watching the street, turned to face her daughter. Her expression was pained in a way Zoe rarely saw. "Because the moment I do, Zoe, the peace we've built here disappears. Do you understand? The life we have, the quiet mornings and safe nights, all of it goes away. There are things in my past, people I've worked with and against, missions that are still classified. The moment I prove who I was, all of that comes rushing back, and I won't risk your safety for my pride. But everyone thinks I'm a liar." Zoe sobbed. "I know, baby. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Amara pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, holding her while she cried. "But your safety matters more than their opinions. It always will." That night, after Zoe had finally cried herself to sleep, Amara sat alone in her kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She read it twice, her expression darkening, then deleted it. The message had been brief. "They're digging into your old files. Someone's trying to prove you never existed." Amara pulled up a secure browser and checked several classified databases using credentials that should have been deactivated years ago, but that she'd maintained for exactly this reason. Someone had indeed been accessing her service records, or trying to. Whoever it was had enough clearance to get into preliminary files, but not deep enough to see the truly classified missions. They were poking around, testing boundaries, looking for proof that Amara Lewis was a fraud. She knew what this meant. The police report filed by Carter, the media attention, the viral video. All of it had drawn the wrong kind of attention from the wrong kind of people. Some wanted to expose her as a liar. Others, more dangerously, wanted to confirm she was real. A soft knock at the door made Amara move instantly. her body dropping into a defensive posture before her mind fully registered the movement. She approached the door with tactical caution, checking the peephole. Standing on her porch, dressed in civilian clothes, but with an unmistakable military bearing, was Sergeant Dana Reeves. Amara hadn't seen her old teammate in nearly 3 years, not since the classified ceremony where they'd both been decorated for a mission that officially never happened. Amara opened the door. "Dana." "Commander." Reeves nodded, then glanced past Amara into the house. "We need to talk." They sat in the kitchen, speaking in low voices. Reeves, a black woman in her early 40s with close-cropped hair and assessing eyes, wasted no time on pleasantries. "They're coming after you hard. Carter and that principal filed a joint report accusing you of falsifying military credentials and endangering your child's welfare. CPS is getting involved. Local detectives, too." "On what grounds?" "They're claiming you've created a delusional environment for your daughter, that you've convinced her of false memories, that you're mentally unstable. It's a coordinated attack designed to force you to either prove your service, which would expose classified operations, or accept being branded a fraud." Amara's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "Who's behind it?" "Carter's ego, mostly. But he's getting help. There's a journalist who's been feeding him information, promising him fame if he can expose this stolen valor case. The journalist has some military connections, enough to know how to ask dangerous questions. What do you recommend?" Reeves leaned back, her expression grim. "Officially? Nothing. Keep your head down, let it blow over. Unofficially? Commander, they're not going to let this go. You need to prepare for a fight. I won't risk Zoe. They're already risking her. Those reports they filed. CPS is taking them seriously. You could lose custody while they investigate." The words hit Amara like a physical blow. "They can't. They can and they will if you don't act. I'm not saying go public with everything, but you need leverage. You need people in your corner who can verify your service without compromising operations." "Torres?" "Already working on it. She's furious, by the way. Called it an attack on the entire program. But her hands are partly tied by protocol. This has to be handled carefully." Before Amara could respond, her phone buzzed with an official notification. She read it, her face going pale. "What is it?" Reeves asked. "Warrant for my arrest. They're charging me with falsification of military records and child endangerment." "When?" "Now. They're probably already on their way." As if summoned by her words, red and blue lights began flashing outside the windows. Multiple vehicles pulled up to the modest house. Amara stood slowly, every muscle in her body coiled with tension. "Zoe," she said quietly. "I'll stay with her," Reeves promised. "I'll make sure she's safe. Don't let them take her. Promise me, Dana." "On my life, Commander." The pounding on the door was aggressive, authoritative. Amara opened it to find Officer Carter flanked by 2 other officers and a detective she didn't recognize. "Amara Lewis," Carter said, his satisfaction barely concealed. "You're under arrest for falsification of military credentials, obstruction of justice, and child endangerment." "Those charges are fabricated," Amara said calmly. "We'll verify your claims in court. Until then, you're coming with us." Zoe appeared at the top of the stairs, woken by the commotion. When she saw the officers, saw her mother being handcuffed, she screamed, "No, you're making a mistake. My mom didn't do anything wrong." "Zoe, listen to me," Amara called out as they led her toward the door. "Remember what I taught you. Remember who you are. Dana will take care of you." "Mom?" Zoe tried to rush down the stairs, but Reeves caught her gently, holding her back. As they loaded Amara into the patrol car, Carter leaned in close. "You should have just admitted the truth from the start. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." Amara looked at him with such cold intensity that his smile faltered. "The truth is coming, Officer Carter. And when it does, I hope you're ready for it." As the patrol car pulled away, Zoe watched from the window, tears streaming down her face. Reeves stood beside her, one hand on the girl's shoulder, the other pulling out a secure phone. She dialed a number that rang in a secure facility 2 states away. When a voice answered, Reeves spoke 3 words that set a series of events in motion. "She's in custody." There was a pause, then a calm, commanding voice responded. "Activate Protocol Lighthouse. Time to bring our people home." Reeves ended the call and looked down at Zoe. "Your mom's going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise you that." "How do you know?" "Because she's not alone. She never was. And it's time everyone learned exactly who Amara Lewis really is." Outside, in the shadows beyond the streetlights, engines quietly started. Vehicles that had been stationed at carefully calculated positions began moving with synchronized precision. In military facilities across the region, secure communications flickered to life. A team that had been scattered, living quiet. Civilian lives received the call they'd hoped would never come but had always been ready to answer. The countdown had begun. The truth was mobilizing. And when it arrived, it would storm through that courtroom with the force of justice too long denied. The fluorescent lights in the county courthouse flickered with an irritating buzz that seemed to match the tension in the air. Amara's case had been fast-tracked through the system, with suspicious speed. Within 72 hours of her arrest, she faced charges of false representation and obstruction of justice. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, giving her legal team almost no time to prepare a proper defense. Her court-appointed attorney, a young man fresh out of law school named David Mills, seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the case. He sat across from Amara in the attorney conference room, papers spread across the table, his expression increasingly anxious. "Commander Lewis, the problem is that most of your service record is classified. I can't access it, which means I can't use it to defend you. Without concrete proof, this becomes your word against theirs." Amara sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table. "I understand the difficulty, Mr. Mills, but I won't compromise national security to save my reputation." "It's not just your reputation at stake," he reminded her gently. "It's your freedom and your daughter." That struck home. Amara's composure cracked just slightly, a flicker of pain crossing her face. "Where is Zoe now?" "She's been placed in temporary foster care with the Hendersons. It's standard procedure during investigations like this." Amara's jaw clenched. The Hendersons were strangers. Her daughter was sleeping in a strange house, surrounded by strange people, all because the system had decided she was a threat. Meanwhile, in a modest home on the other side of town, Zoe sat on an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar room, staring at her phone. The foster family seemed nice enough. Mrs. Henderson had made dinner and tried to make conversation, but Zoe had barely eaten. Her mind was racing with plans, with possibilities, with the desperate need to do something. She remembered the business card her mother kept in the drawer of the kitchen desk at home. Captain Torres, Naval Base Operations. There was an email address printed in small letters at the bottom. Zoe had memorized it months ago, filed it away as emergency information. Using the school laptop the Hendersons had set up for her homework, Zoe opened an incognito browser and typed out an email. Her fingers trembled as she wrote, "Dear Captain Torres, my name is Zoe Lewis. You probably don't know me, but you know my mom, Amara Lewis. She's in trouble and I don't know what else to do. They arrested her and took me away and everyone thinks she's lying about being a SEAL. But she's not lying. I know she's not. Please, if you can help her, if you can tell them the truth, please do it. She won't ask for help herself because that's not who she is. But I'm asking, please help my mom. Zoe." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then closed the browser and deleted the history. Her heart pounded as she lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, hoping that somewhere out there, Someone was listening. Back at the county jail, Amara sat in her holding cell during the quiet hours after lights out. The cell was small and cold, with a thin mattress and a toilet that offered no privacy. Other inmates had come and gone throughout the day, mostly drunk and disorderly cases that would be released by morning. But Amara remained, classified as a potential flight risk due to her alleged military training. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her back straight, her breathing controlled. She whispered words in a rhythm that had sustained her through the darkest nights of her service. "I will not quit. I will not fail. I persevere and thrive on adversity. My nation expects me to be physically harder and mentally stronger than my enemies." It was part of the SEAL ethos, words carved into her soul during training, that had pushed her beyond any limit she thought she had. She repeated them now, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but loud enough to remind herself who she was. A sound made her open her eyes. An inmate in the cell across from hers, a weathered woman in her 50s, stood at the bars watching her. There was something familiar about the way the woman held herself, a straightness to her posture that suggested military bearing. "You're really one of them, aren't you?" the woman said quietly. Amara studied her carefully before responding. "What makes you say that?" "I was a Marine, did 2 tours in Iraq. I recognize the cadence. Most people don't know it unless they've lived it." The woman extended her hand through the bars. "Corporal Sarah Mitchell, retired." Amara stood and approached, shaking the offered hand. "Amara Lewis." "I know who you are. Saw you on the news. Everybody thinks you're full of it, claiming to be a SEAL." Mitchell paused, her eyes assessing. "But I've seen enough soldiers to know the real thing. You are what you say you are." Something in Amara's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you for that." "Don't thank me. Just survive this. Whatever's coming, you survive it. That's what we do." Mitchell lifted her hand in a slow, deliberate salute. It was against regulations, unconventional but profoundly meaningful. After a moment's hesitation, Amara returned it. Across town, in a secure facility on the naval base, Sergeant Dana Reeves stood in a dimly lit hangar surrounded by faces she hadn't seen together in years. They'd come from different cities, different lives, all responding to the coded message that had gone out 2 days earlier. These were Amara's people, her team, her family. Lieutenant Marcus Mason, a tall black man with iron-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd led men through hell, spoke first. "What's the situation?" "Commander Lewis has been arrested on fabricated charges," Reeves explained. "They're using her silence about classified operations as evidence that she's lying. The court hearing is Monday morning. If we don't act, she loses custody of her daughter and faces criminal charges." "What are we authorized to do?" asked Officer Jennings, a white woman in her 30s who'd served under Amara on 3 separate deployments. "Nothing officially," Reeves admitted. "We're on our own here. Command is aware, but they can't sanction direct intervention. This is personal." "Then we make it count," Mason said firmly. "Commander Lewis never left anyone behind. We're sure not leaving her now." Captain Torres entered the hangar, her presence immediately commanding attention. She was a woman who'd risen through the ranks by being smarter and tougher than everyone around her, and her expression now was carved from steel. "I received an email from Lewis's daughter," Torres said without preamble. 11 years old, and she's begging strangers to save her mother because the system has failed them both. That ends now." "What's the plan, Captain?" Reeves asked. Torres pulled up a digital map on a tablet, showing the courthouse layout. "We can't just burst in there without authorization. We need leverage, evidence, and timing. But most importantly, we need to remind that courtroom that Amara Lewis didn't serve in the shadows for them to erase her in the light." "Are we talking about a full unit deployment?" Mason asked, a slight smile crossing his face. Full-dress uniforms, service records that we can declassify without compromising active operations, and enough military presence to make it crystal clear that when you accuse one of ours, you accuse all of us. Torres's eyes swept the assembled team. We storm that courtroom legally, but we storm it hard. Over the next several days, the team worked with military precision. Torres pulled strings at the Pentagon, getting partial declassification of several of Amara's missions. Nothing that would compromise national security, but enough to prove beyond doubt that she'd served with distinction. Reeves gathered testimony from team members willing to go on record. Mason coordinated logistics for what they were calling Operation Lighthouse, ensuring everyone would be in position when the time came. Meanwhile, the media circus around Amara's case grew larger. Officer Carter appeared on a local talk show, basking in the attention. The host, a middle-aged man with perfect hair and a condescending smile, lobbed him softball questions. "Officer Carter, you were the one who really brought this case to light. What made you suspicious?" Carter leaned back in his chair, radiating false modesty. "Well, Jim, it's really about protecting the integrity of our military. When someone claims to be a SEAL, especially someone who, let's be honest, doesn't fit the profile, we have a duty to investigate. And by doesn't fit the profile, you mean? I mean a single mother living quietly in a small town. No visible signs of that kind of elite service. If she's really a SEAL, I'm the president." The audience laughed at his joke. In her office at the naval base, Captain Torres watched the clip with an expression of cold fury. Beside her, Reeves muttered a string of curses under her breath. "He has no idea what's coming," Torres said quietly. "Should we warn him?" Reeves asked with dark humor. "Where would be the fun in that?" Zoe watched the same clip on her borrowed laptop in her foster room. Tears of frustration streamed down her face. How could people be so blind? How could they mock something they didn't understand? That night she made a decision. The Hendersons were kind but distracted, busy with their own children and routines. It would be easy to slip out. Zoe waited until after midnight, then quietly dressed in dark clothes and climbed out her window. She'd memorized the route to the naval base from studying maps online. It was 5 miles, but she'd walked farther before. The night was cold and dark, with only scattered streetlights to guide her. Zoe kept to the shadows, moving quickly, driven by a fierce determination that was pure Amara Lewis. She had her mother's eyes, her mother's stubborn chin, and right now, her mother's absolute refusal to give up. She reached the base gates just as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The security guard, a young man who looked barely out of his teens, stared at her in confusion. "Kid, what are you doing here?" "I need to see Captain Torres," Zoe said, lifting her chin. "It's about my mother, Commander Amara Lewis." The guard's expression shifted from confusion to recognition. "You're her daughter, the one from the news?" "Yes, sir, and I'm not leaving until someone listens to me." The guard studied her for a long moment, seeing something in this small, determined girl that reminded him of the officers he respected most. He picked up his phone. "Let me make a call." 20 minutes later, Zoe sat in Captain Torres' office, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of hot chocolate in her hands. Torres sat across from her, and the kindness in her eyes made Zoe want to cry all over again. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman," Torres said gently. "One of the finest soldiers I've ever known." "Then why won't anyone help her?" Zoe asked, her voice breaking. "We are helping her, Zoe. I promise you that. But we have to do it the right way, through proper channels and official procedures. Your mother taught us that discipline matters, that we can't just act on emotion. What if it's too late?" Torres leaned forward, her expression intensifying. "Do you know what your mother did on her last classified mission? She led a team into hostile territory to extract 15 Allied soldiers who'd been captured. She was shot twice, once in the shoulder and once in the leg. But she didn't stop until every single one of those soldiers was safe. That's who your mother is. She doesn't quit, and neither do we. Torres stood and walked to a file cabinet, removing a folder. She opened it to reveal photographs. Zoe gasped. There was her mother, years younger but unmistakably her, in full tactical gear. Face camouflaged, weapon in hand, standing with a team of similarly equipped soldiers. In another photo, she was receiving a medal from a high-ranking officer. In another, she was teaching a group of recruits, her posture authoritative and commanding. She's everything she said she was, Zoe whispered. Yes, and on Monday, the whole world is going to see it. Torres showed Zoe more photos, told her carefully edited stories of Amara's service, and by the time she finished, Zoe's tears had dried. Her mother was real. Her mother was a hero. And soon, everyone would know it. The weekend passed with agonizing slowness. Amara remained in her cell, stoic and silent, meditating and exercising in the limited space available. She knew something was happening, could feel the shift in energy around her, but she didn't know what. On Sunday evening, she received an unexpected visitor. David Mills arrived with a thick folder of documents, his expression transformed from anxious to determined. "Commander Lewis, I don't know how you did it, but we just received declassified service records, testimonials from decorated officers, and photographic evidence of your service. This changes everything." Amara's eyes widened slightly. "From where?" "Naval Special Warfare Command. Apparently, Captain Torres personally authorized the declassification of several mission files. Not enough to compromise security, but more than enough to prove you're exactly who you said you are." For the first time in days, Amara felt hope kindle in her chest. "When does the court see this?" "Tomorrow morning, first thing." Mills smiled. "I think you're going to walk out of that courtroom a free woman, Commander." That same evening, across town, the SEAL team made their final preparations. They gathered in the hangar one last time, checking uniforms, reviewing the plan, ensuring every detail was perfect. Reeves stood before them, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Tomorrow, we remind the world what it means to serve with honor. We remind them that our bonds don't break just because we take off the uniform. Commander Lewis stood for us in the dark places. Now we stand for her in the light. Hoo-yah!" The team responded in unison, the SEAL battle cry echoing through the hangar. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and sharp sunlight. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters, protesters both for and against Amara, and curious onlookers drawn by the media spectacle. News vans lined the street, satellite dishes pointed skyward, cameras ready to capture whatever happened next. Inside, Zoe had been brought from her foster placement to attend the hearing. She wasn't supposed to be there, but Torres had pulled strings, arguing that the child had a right to see her mother vindicated. Zoe sat in the back row, wearing her best dress, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Amara was led into the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing an orange jumpsuit that couldn't diminish her bearing. When she saw Zoe, her composure nearly broke, but she held it together, giving her daughter a small nod of reassurance. Judge Malin, a white man in his 60s with silver hair and reading glasses, took his seat at the bench. He reviewed the case file with a frown, clearly uncomfortable with the media attention this case had generated. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the state versus Amara Lewis. Ms. Lewis, you stand accused of falsifying military credentials and child endangerment. How do you plead?" Before Amara could respond, David Mills stood. "Your Honor, if I may, we have new evidence that I believe will resolve this matter quickly." Officer Carter sat in the gallery, smirking slightly. Principal Harris sat beside him, both men confident in their position. They'd collaborated on their testimony, rehearsed their statements, and believed completely that they'd exposed a fraud. Judge Malin gestured for Mills to proceed. "Let's see it." As Mills began distributing copies of the declassified files, Amara noticed something. The back doors of the courtroom had opened quietly, and someone had entered, then another, and another. They moved with synchronized precision, taking positions along the walls, men and women in full-dress Navy uniforms, medals gleaming on their chests, faces serious and professional. Reeves, Mason, Jennings, Torres. Others whose names Amara hadn't heard in years, but whose faces she'd never forgotten. The courtroom began to take notice. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Reporters turned their cameras toward the growing military presence. Judge Malin looked up from the documents, his frown deepening. "What's going on here? Who authorized this?" Before anyone could answer, the doors burst open with a thunderous bang that made everyone jump. More SEAL team members flooded into the room, not running, but moving with the kind of controlled urgency that spoke of tactical training. They weren't armed beyond their ceremonial dress swords, but their presence was overwhelming. The audience and officers froze mid-movement, shocked into absolute stillness. The bailiffs reached for their weapons but stopped, uncertain. This wasn't an attack. This was something else entirely. Sergeant Dana Reeves stepped forward, her helmet tucked under her arm, her posture, parade ground, perfect. "Permission to speak freely, Your Honor." Judge Malin's face had gone pale. "Who are you?" "Sergeant Dana Reeves, United States Navy SEALs. I served under Commander Amara Lewis for 6 years across 4 continents, and more classified operations than I'm authorized to discuss in open court." She turned to face Amara, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. "Commander Lewis, we never stopped following your orders." The courtroom erupted in gasps and exclamations. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. But Amara stood frozen, her eyes locked on her team, tears beginning to stream down her face. Officer Carter's smirk had vanished completely. He stared at the assembled SEALs with an expression somewhere between shock and horror, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Captain Torres stepped forward next, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Your Honor, I am Captain Elena Torres, Naval Special Warfare Command. I have here verified mission records that have been declassified specifically for these proceedings. Commander Lewis's service is not only real but exemplary. She has received multiple commendations, including 2 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star for valor under fire." Judge Malin's hands trembled as he took the documents Torres handed him. He read in silence for several long moments while the courtroom held its collective breath. Zoe, unable to contain herself any longer, suddenly stood and shouted, "I told them, Mom. I told them who you were." Amara turned to look at her daughter, and the naked emotion on her face silenced the room more effectively than any gavel. Love, pride, pain, and relief warred across her features. "Your Honor," Amara said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I didn't speak earlier because my duty was to protect classified information and the lives of people still in the field. But today, you've put my daughter through hell because of your disbelief, because you couldn't imagine that someone who looks like me, who lives like me, could have served the way I did." Judge Malin removed his glasses, wiping them slowly as he processed everything before him. The evidence, the testimony, the military personnel filling his courtroom. When he spoke, his voice was subdued. "Commander Lewis, it appears that not only are these charges completely without merit, but that you are owed a profound apology. I'm dismissing all charges immediately and ordering an internal inquiry into how this case was brought before this court in the first place." He turned his attention to Officer Carter, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Officer Carter, I'll be recommending a full investigation into your conduct. The same goes for you, Mr. Harris." Reeves and 2 military police officers who'd entered with the team approached Carter. "Officer Brent Carter, you're being detained for questioning regarding obstruction of justice, falsification of reports, and public endangerment. You'll need to come with us." Carter's face went from pale to red. "You can't arrest me. I'm law enforcement. We're military police with jurisdiction over matters involving military personnel," one of the MPs said calmly. "And you targeted one of ours based on prejudice and false information. Sir, please stand up." As Carter was led away in handcuffs, the irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone in the OE courtroom. Judge Mallon addressed Amara once more. "Commander Lewis, you are free to go. Your daughter will be returned to your custody immediately. I cannot adequately express my regret for what you've been put through." Amara finally had her handcuffs removed. She stood there for a moment, rubbing her wrists, then slowly turned to face her team. Every member of her old unit stood at attention, and as one, they raised their hands in salute. The image was powerful enough to bring tears to eyes throughout the courtroom. Here stood warriors who'd fought in the shadows, now standing in the light for one of their own. But Amara didn't return the salute. Instead, she walked through the assembled team to where Zoe stood, tears streaming down the girl's face. Amara knelt beside her daughter and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I told them, Mom," Zoe sobbed into her mother's shoulder. "I told them who you were. I know, baby. I know. You were so brave, so strong." Amara pulled back slightly, cupping Zoe's face in her hands. "But remember what I said. We fight for truth, not applause. This isn't about them believing us. It's about us knowing who we are." Zoe nodded, wiping her tears. "But it feels good that they finally know." "Yes," Amara admitted with a small smile. "Yes, it does." As mother and daughter held each other, the SEAL team maintained their salute, creating a corridor of honor around them. Captain Torres approached, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "Welcome back, Commander," she said quietly. "I never really left," Amara replied. "But thank you for all of this. You'd have done the same for any of us. You have done the same for all of us." Torres glanced around at the assembled team. "We take care of our own. Always." The media frenzy outside was chaotic, but the SEALs formed a protective barrier around Amara and Zoe as they exited the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but the military presence kept them at a respectful distance. On the courthouse steps, bathed in morning sunlight, Amara paused. She looked at her daughter, at her team, at the crowd gathered to witness this moment. Then she looked directly at a news camera. "My name is Commander Amara Lewis. I served this country with honor in places I can't name, doing things I can't discuss, alongside the finest people I've ever known. I didn't need to prove that to anyone. But my daughter needed the world to stop calling her a liar, and that's why we're here today." She didn't elaborate further, didn't give them the sensational story they wanted. She simply took Zoe's hand and walked down the steps, her team falling into formation around her. Officer Carter, being led to a military vehicle, watched them pass. Amara paused briefly, meeting his eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The look alone conveyed everything. He'd underestimated her, dismissed her, mocked her, and now he understood exactly how wrong he'd been. As the Lewis family disappeared into a waiting vehicle escorted by her SEAL team, the courthouse behind them erupted in chaos. Reporters filed their stories. Social media exploded with the footage. The video of the SEAL team saluting their commander in that courtroom would be viewed millions of times in the next few hours. But for Amara and Zoe, driving away from that place toward home, the only thing that mattered was the peace finally settling over them. The storm had broken. The truth had prevailed. And they were together again. The courtroom continued to buzz with activity even after Amara and Zoe left. Judge Mallon had called for an immediate recess, overwhelmed by what had just transpired. The media presence outside grew more intense by the minute, with national news outlets now picking up the story that had started as local mockery. Inside a secure conference room adjacent to the courtroom, Captain Torres sat with several members of the SEAL team, reviewing what had just happened. The unauthorized entry into a civilian court proceeding, even for just purposes, would have consequences. Sergeant Reeves leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Think we'll catch heat for this?" "Absolutely," Torres replied without hesitation. But it was the right thing to do. Sometimes following orders means knowing when to break protocol for something bigger. Lieutenant Mason nodded. "Commander Lewis taught us that. Mission first, but never leave your people behind." Torres's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Naval Command. She read it, her expression unreadable, then looked up at her team. "Washington wants a full debrief within 48 hours. They're calling it an unauthorized demonstration of military force in civilian space." "Worth it," Reeves said simply. "Agreed," Torres confirmed, "but there will be fallout. For all of us." Meanwhile, Amara and Zoe arrived back at their modest home, escorted by two unmarked security vehicles that Torres had insisted provide protection. The house looked exactly as they'd left it, yet everything felt different. The secret that had defined their quiet life was now public knowledge. Zoe walked through the room slowly, touching familiar things as if to confirm they were real. Amara watched her daughter, seeing the weight this ordeal had placed on such small shoulders. "Are you okay, baby?" Amara asked softly. Zoe turned, and her expression was complex, mixing relief with something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. "I don't know, Mom. Everything's different now. Everyone knows about you. Does that bother you?" "No." "Yes. Maybe." Zoe sat on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. "I wanted them to believe me so badly, and now they do. But it's weird. All those people taking pictures, asking questions. Is it always going to be like this?" Amara sat beside her, wrapping an arm around Zoe's shoulders. "I hope not. The media attention will fade eventually. People will move on to the next story. But some things have changed permanently. And we'll have to figure out how to handle that together. Do you wish I hadn't said anything? At school, I mean. If I'd just stayed quiet, none of this would have happened." "Don't you dare think that," Amara said firmly, tilting Zoe's chin up to meet her eyes. "You told the truth. You stood up for what was right, even when everyone doubted you. That takes courage I'm proud of. This mess isn't your fault. It's the fault of small-minded people who couldn't imagine a world bigger than their prejudices." Zoe leaned into her mother's embrace. "I was so scared when they took you away." "I know. I was scared too. Not of jail, but of losing you." Amara kissed the top of Zoe's head. "But we made it through. We're together. That's what matters." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Amara tensed automatically, her body shifting into defensive readiness before she consciously recognized the habit. She checked the window and saw Dana Reeves standing on the porch, out of uniform now, wearing jeans and a casual jacket. Amara opened the door. "Dana, wanted to check on you both," Reeves said, stepping inside. "And to give you a heads up. The media is camped outside your street. Security's keeping them back, but they're persistent." "How long will they stay?" "Until they get their story or something bigger comes along." Reeves glanced at Zoe, then back to Amara. "Torres wanted me to tell you that she's handling things on the official end. The Navy's going to release a carefully worded statement confirming your service without compromising operational security." "What about the team? Will there be repercussions for what happened today?" Reeves smiled slightly. "Probably. But we knew what we were signing up for. No regrets, Commander." Over the next several days, the story exploded across every media platform. The footage of the SEAL team saluting Amara in that courtroom became iconic, shared millions of times with hashtags like Real Hero, Commander Lewis, and Women in Military trending worldwide. But not all the attention was positive. News outlets began digging into Amara's past, trying to find details about her classified missions. Some journalists praised her service. Others questioned whether the military display in the courtroom had been appropriate. Political commentators debated the role of women in combat. Everyone had an opinion. At Riverside Elementary, Zoe returned to school to find herself suddenly famous. Students who'd mocked her now wanted to befriend her. Teachers who doubted her now treated her with cautious respect. Mrs. Keene pulled her aside the first day back. "Zoe, I owe you an apology," the teacher said, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I should have believed you. I should have listened." "It's okay, Mrs. Keene," Zoe said quietly, though it wasn't entirely true. The hurt still lingered. "No, it's not okay. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. That's not the kind of teacher I want to be." The attention at school was overwhelming. During lunch, a group of girls Zoe barely knew surrounded her table, asking rapid-fire questions about her mother. Did she really save people? Did she have guns? Did she kill anyone? The questions felt invasive, reducing her mother's complex service to sensational sound bites. Jake Henderson, the 8th grader who'd led the mockery, approached with genuine contrition. "Hey, Zoe, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for being such a jerk. Your mom's actually really cool." Zoe looked at him with the kind of steady gaze she'd learned from Amara. "My mom was always cool, Jake. You just couldn't see it." While Zoe navigated her new reality at school, Amara faced her own challenges. Morning talk shows wanted her for interviews. Publishers called offering book deals. A Hollywood producer left 3 voicemails about film rights. Every request was politely declined. But more concerning were the other calls. Unknown numbers that disconnected when she answered. Emails from addresses that looked official, but felt wrong. One message simply read, "Congratulations on your exposure. Some of us remember the Karachi operation. We should talk." Amara deleted it immediately and reported it to Torres, who promised to have military intelligence investigate. The past Amara had tried to leave behind wasn't just circling anymore. It was reaching out, testing, probing for weakness. One evening, while Amara was making dinner, she noticed a car parked across the street that hadn't been there before. Dark sedan, tinted windows, engine running. She watched it for several minutes through the kitchen window, her tactical instincts humming with warning. "Zoe, go upstairs and do your homework," Amara said calmly. "But Mom, I was going to help you cook." "Now, baby, please." Something in her mother's tone made Zoe obey without argument. Once she heard Zoe's bedroom door close, Amara pulled out a phone number she'd hoped never to use. It rang twice before Torres answered. "We've got a situation," Amara said quietly. "Surveillance outside my house. Not friendly. I'll have a team there in 10 minutes. Don't engage unless necessary." "Understood." Amara moved through the house systematically, checking locks, closing curtains, positioning herself where she could see both the front and back entrances. Old training kicked in automatically, her body remembering skills that had kept her alive in far more dangerous situations than this. The sedan remained for another 8 minutes, then pulled away just before Torres's security team arrived. When they searched the area, they found nothing, but Amara's instincts told her this wasn't over. The next development came from an unexpected source. An investigative journalist named Marcus Webb published an article titled "The Real Story Behind Commander Lewis: Uncomfortable Questions the Military Won't Answer." The piece didn't deny Amara's service, but questioned aspects of her record, pointing out gaps in publicly available information and suggesting possible misconduct during overseas operations. The article included doctored photographs, images that had been digitally altered to make Amara appear in situations that never happened. One showed her in a combat zone standing over what appeared to be civilian casualties, with a caption implying unlawful engagement. None of it was real, but the damage was immediate. Public opinion, which had swung heavily in Amara's favor, began to split. message boards filled with conspiracy theories. Some people defended her fiercely, but others questioned whether the courtroom display had been theatrical misdirection to cover up war crimes. Zoe discovered the article when a classmate showed it to her on a phone during lunch. She read it with growing horror, seeing her mother described as a potential war criminal, a murderer hiding behind patriotism. That afternoon, Zoe came home in tears. Amara held her while she sobbed out the story of what she'd read, how kids at school were saying terrible things again, how everything felt like it was falling apart. "Why are they doing this?" Zoe cried. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" "Because the truth is complicated, and some people profit from confusion," Amara said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "That journalist didn't write that article to inform people. He wrote it for clicks, for controversy, for his career. But the pictures are fake. I was never in those situations. Those photos are fabrications designed to cast doubt." Amara pulled back to look at her daughter. "Zoe, listen to me. This is going to get worse before it gets better. There are people who can't accept what I represent. They'd rather destroy my reputation than admit their own biases. What do? We survive. We stay strong. And we trust that the people who matter know the truth." But that night, after Zoe was asleep, Amara sat alone in her darkened living room, staring at nothing. She'd faced enemy combatants, survived torture training, led missions where one mistake meant death. Yet this felt harder somehow. This was an attack, not just on her, but on her daughter's sense of safety and truth. Her phone buzzed. Dana Reeves calling. "I saw the article," Reeves said without preamble. "It's garbage. Torres is already working with military intelligence to trace the source of those fake photos. How long will that take?" "Too long. In the meantime, the narrative is shifting. Some media outlets are picking up Webb's story, running with it." Reeves paused. "Commander, I hate to say this, but you might need to consider making a public statement, fighting back. I don't owe anyone an explanation. No, you don't. But Zoe deserves to not have her mother slandered with lies." That hit home. Amara closed her eyes, weighing her options. Going public meant more exposure, more invasion of privacy, more risk. But staying silent meant letting the lies spread unchallenged. "I'll think about it," she finally said. The situation escalated to the next evening when Amara discovered that someone had broken into their home while they were out. Nothing obvious was stolen, but things had been moved, searched through. Her laptop was open when she'd left it closed. Zoe's room had been rifled through, drawers slightly ajar. Most concerning, Amara found a small listening device planted behind the living room bookshelf. She recognized the make and model, military-grade surveillance equipment that shouldn't be in civilian hands. She disabled the device carefully, then called Torres again. "We've been compromised. Someone broke in, planted surveillance. This is escalating beyond media attention." "Pack a bag," Torres said immediately. "You and Zoe need to relocate until we figure out who's behind this. I'm not running from my own home. Amara, as your friend and your former commanding officer, I'm telling you this isn't about pride. Someone is actively targeting you, and they have resources. Your daughter's safety comes first." Torres was right, and Amara knew it. "Where do we go?" "I've arranged a safe house on the naval base. Full security, monitored access. You'll stay there until we neutralize this threat." An hour later, Amara and Zoe were driving through the night toward the naval base, their belongings hastily packed. Zoe stared out the window, processing this latest upheaval in their already chaotic lives. "Is this because of me?" she asked quietly. "Because I told everyone about you?" "No, baby. This is because people are scared of strong women who don't fit their expectations. It's because I challenge their assumptions just by existing and succeeding." Amara reached over to squeeze Zoe's hand. What's happening isn't fair, and it isn't right, but we're going to get through it. Together, always together. At the naval base, they were escorted to a small but comfortable apartment in the secure housing section. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Access required biometric clearance. For the first time in days, Amara felt like she could breathe without watching over her shoulder. Torres arrived within an hour, bringing dinner and updates. Military intelligence has traced the fake photos back to a journalist named Webb, but he's claiming he received them from an anonymous source. We're digging deeper. And the surveillance equipment? That's more concerning. It's military grade, which means either it was stolen or someone with clearance provided it. We're investigating both possibilities. Zoe sat at the small dining table, picking at her food. Captain Torres, is my mom in danger? Torres looked at the girl with respect for her directness. There are people who don't like what your mother represents, but she's safe here, and we're working to make sure she stays that way. What about school, my friends? We're working on a security plan that will let you continue your normal life as much as possible, Torres assured her. This is temporary, Zoe, I promise. After Torres left, Amara helped Zoe settle into the unfamiliar bedroom. The girl looked small and lost in the standard-issue military housing, so different from their cozy home. Mom, are things ever going to be normal again? Amara sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Zoe's hair. I don't know what normal looks like anymore, baby. But we'll find a new version of it. One where you don't have to hide who your mother is, where I don't have to pretend my service didn't matter. That might not be the normal we had before, but maybe it'll be better. How can it be better if people are lying about you, and we have to hide? Because now you know that when people doubt you, there are others who will stand up for the truth. You learned that you're stronger than you thought, and I learned that I don't have to carry everything alone. Amara kissed Zoe's forehead. Those are good things, even if getting here was hard. Zoe considered this, then wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world. As Zoe drifted off to sleep, Amara stood at the window, looking out over the naval base. Somewhere out there were people who wanted to destroy her reputation, to punish her for being visible, for challenging expectations. But here, in this moment, her daughter was safe and sleeping peacefully. That was worth fighting for. Her phone lit up with a message from Reeves. We're not letting them win, Commander. Your team has your 6. Always. Amara smiled slightly, typing back a simple response. Hoo-yah. The battle wasn't over. The lies still circulated, the threats still lurked, and the media storm still raged. But Amara Lewis had survived worse. She'd survived it by relying on her training, her team, and her unshakable determination to protect what mattered most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she and Zoe were together and safe. And that was enough. 3 days after moving into the naval base housing, Amara received the official summons. A congressional hearing had been convened to investigate the unauthorized release of classified military data and the deployment of military personnel in civilian judicial proceedings. The letter, stamped with official seals and signatures, made it clear this wasn't a request. Amara sat at the small kitchen table in their temporary quarters, reading the summons while Zoe got ready for school. The base had arranged for secure transportation to Riverside Elementary, complete with military police escort. It was necessary but conspicuous, another reminder of how their lives had been irrevocably changed. "Mom, are you okay?" Zoe asked, noticing her mother's expression. "Just some official business I need to handle," Amara replied, folding the letter. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Zoe had learned to read her mother's tells, the slight tension in her jaw, the way her fingers tapped against the table. "Is it bad?" Amara met her daughter's eyes and decided on honesty. "It's complicated. The government wants to ask questions about what happened in the courtroom. Some people think Captain Torres and the team shouldn't have done what they did. But they were helping you. They were telling the truth. I know, baby. But sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences. Amara stood, helping Zoe with her backpack. Don't worry. We've faced worse. That afternoon, Captain Torres received the same summons. She sat in her office with Dana Reeves, reviewing the implications. They're going to try to make an example of us, Torres said grimly. Claim we acted outside our authority, compromised operational security, turned the military into a political tool. We saved Commander Lewis from a massive injustice, Reeves countered. That has to count for something. It does. But Washington doesn't like surprises, and we gave them a big one. Torres leaned back in her chair. The question is whether they'll see this as a breach of protocol or as a necessary defense of one of our own. What's your read? Could go either way. We need to be prepared for both outcomes. Meanwhile, the investigation into Marcus Webb's fake photographs had yielded results. Military intelligence traced the doctored images back to a server farm in Eastern Europe. But more significantly, they found Webb's financial records showing a payment of $50,000 from an account linked to a private security firm with known anti-military activism ties. When confronted with this evidence, Webb crumbled. In a recorded interview with military investigators, he admitted he'd been approached by the firm with a proposition: discredit Commander Lewis in exchange for money and exclusive access to inside sources for future stories. He'd taken the deal, believing Amara was likely a fraud anyway. The revelation hit the news cycle like a bomb. Headlines shifted overnight from questioning Amara's service to exposing the conspiracy against her. Webb's journalistic career imploded. The private security firm faced federal investigation. Public opinion swung back in Amara's favor, but the damage to her sense of safety remained. At school, Zoe's project on Women Who Protect Us had taken on new significance. Her teacher, Mrs. Keene, asked if she'd be willing to present it to the entire school assembly. Zoe was nervous but agreed, wanting to honor her mother properly. The assembly was held on a Friday morning, with students from all grades packed into the gymnasium. Zoe stood at the podium, a slideshow of carefully selected images behind her, and began to speak. My name is Zoe Lewis, and my mom is Commander Amara Lewis, a decorated Navy SEAL. A few months ago, nobody believed me when I said that. They laughed at me. They called me a liar. Even some adults didn't believe me. The gym was completely silent, every eye on the small girl speaking with surprising confidence. But the truth doesn't change just because people don't believe it. My mom served our country in places she can't talk about, doing things she can't describe, saving lives that will never know her name. She didn't do it for recognition or praise. She did it because she believed in protecting others. Zoe's voice grew stronger. I learned something from all of this. Being doubted doesn't make you wrong. Being different doesn't make you less. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who stay quiet until they absolutely have to speak. The slideshow behind her showed images Torres had provided. Amara in training, receiving commendations, standing with her team. Nothing classified, but enough to show the reality of her service. My mom taught me that strength doesn't shout, it stands. And I hope all of you remember that the next time someone tells you something that seems impossible, maybe it's not impossible. Maybe you just haven't imagined it yet. The applause that followed was genuine and sustained. Students who'd mocked Zoe weeks earlier now looked at her with respect. Mrs. Keene had tears in her eyes. Principal Harris, attending the assembly, sat with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. A video of Zoe's speech was posted online by a proud parent and went viral within hours. News outlets picked it up, running segments on the girl who stood up for truth. The clip showed Zoe's composure, her eloquence, her refusal to be diminished by doubt. Amara watched the video on her phone that evening, tears streaming down her face. Torres sat beside her in the base housing living room, smiling. "She's got your strength," Torres observed. "She's got her own strength," Amara corrected. "I just hope I haven't ruined her childhood with all this." "Are you kidding? You've given her the greatest gift possible. You've shown her that truth matters, that standing up for yourself matters, that being underestimated is just an opportunity to prove people wrong." The congressional hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday in Washington. Amara, Torres, and Reeves flew to the Capitol together, a unified front facing whatever judgment awaited them. The hearing room was formal and intimidating, with high ceilings and dark wood paneling. Committee members sat at an elevated bench looking down at the witness table where Amara would sit. Cameras lined the back of the room, broadcasting the proceedings live. The committee chair, a stern congressman named Richard Bellamy, opened with a prepared statement about the importance of military protocol and the dangers of unauthorized actions. His tone suggested he'd already reached his conclusions. When it was time for questioning, he addressed Amara directly. "Commander Lewis, can you explain why you mobilized a SEAL unit in a civilian court without proper authorization?" "I didn't mobilize anyone, Congressman," Amara replied calmly. "I was in custody at the time. What my former teammates chose to do was their decision. A decision that compromised operational security and turned military personnel into a political spectacle. With respect, sir, what compromised operational security was the false accusation that forced me to prove my service. My teammates acted under moral duty when the justice system failed." "Moral duty," Bellamy's eyebrows rose. "You don't get to decide when to break protocol based on personal feelings." Before Amara could respond, Captain Torres stood from the audience seating. "Permission to speak, Mr. Chairman." Bellamy looked annoyed but nodded. "State your name and rank for the record." "Captain Elena Torres, Naval Special Warfare Command. I authorized the declassification of Commander Lewis's partial service record and organized the personnel presence at the courthouse. If there's blame to be assigned, it should fall on me." "Captain Torres, you exceeded your authority." "No, sir. I exercised my authority to protect a decorated officer who was being railroaded by a corrupt local police officer and a prejudiced school system." Torres's voice was firm, unapologetic. "Commander Lewis has given everything to this country. When she needed us to stand up for her, we did. That's not a breach of protocol. That's the oath we all took." Murmurs rippled through the hearing room. Congressman Bellamy's expression darkened, but another committee member, Representative Sarah Kim, leaned forward with interest. "Captain Torres, are you saying the local authorities acted improperly?" "I'm saying they arrested a decorated SEAL based solely on prejudice and disbelief, ma'am. Officer Carter has since been charged with corruption and falsification of records. Principal Harris is under investigation. The journalist who published false information about Commander Lewis admitted to being paid to discredit her. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was a coordinated attack." Representative Kim turned to Amara. "Commander Lewis, in your assessment, why were you targeted this way?" Amara chose her words carefully. "Because I represent something that makes certain people uncomfortable. A black woman who succeeded in one of the most elite military programs in the world. A single mother who served in classified operations. People couldn't reconcile those identities, so they decided I must be lying. And your daughter bore the brunt of that disbelief." "Yes, ma'am. An 11-year-old girl was mocked, suspended from school, and temporarily removed from my custody because adults couldn't accept the truth she was telling." The emotion in Amara's voice was controlled but evident. Representative Kim nodded slowly. "I think we're asking the wrong questions here," Kim said, addressing her fellow committee members. "We should be investigating how a decorated service member and her child were failed so catastrophically by local authorities, not questioning whether her teammates acted appropriately in coming to her defense." The hearing continued for another 2 hours, with testimony from Reeves, character witnesses, and military officials. Officer Carter's corruption was detailed extensively. The doctored photographs were presented as evidence of the conspiracy against Amara. By the end, the narrative had shifted completely. Congressman Bellamy, recognizing he'd lost control of the hearing, called for a recess. When they reconvened, his tone was notably different. "Commander Lewis, it appears this committee owes you an apology. The actions taken by your former teammates, while unconventional, were in response to a genuine injustice. This hearing is adjourned, and all charges of impropriety are dropped." He paused, then added with visible reluctance, "Thank you for your service." Outside the Capitol building, reporters swarmed. Amara stood at a microphone, flanked by Torres and Reeves, making a brief statement. "I served this country because I believed in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I never expected to need that same protection here at home. But when I did, my teammates stood up. That's what we do. We take care of our own." She didn't take questions, simply walked away with her team, climbing into a waiting vehicle. But before the door closed, one reporter shouted, "What's next for you, Commander?" Amara paused, looking back. "I'm going home to my daughter. Everything else can wait." 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. Amara and Zoe returned to their house, though security measures had been significantly upgraded. The media attention had finally faded to manageable levels. Zoe thrived at school, her confidence bolstered by everything they'd survived. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the Navy. Amara opened it at the kitchen table while Zoe did homework. "What is it, Mom?" "Captain Torres has been promoted to Commander of Naval Special Warfare Operations," Amara read aloud, smiling. "And she's citing my case as proof of the need for moral leadership under fire." "That's good, right?" "Very good." Another letter announced that a new SEAL training unit would be established, unofficially nicknamed Team Lewis by those in the program. It would focus on preparing diverse candidates for special operations, breaking down barriers that had kept people like Amara from being recognized. Reeves visited that weekend, bringing news that Officer Carter had been convicted of corruption and sentenced to 5 years. Principal Harris had quietly resigned, accepting a settlement to avoid further investigation. "Justice moves slowly, but it moves," Reeves said, sitting in Amara's living room with a cup of coffee. "I told them not to name a unit after me," Amara said, though she was smiling. "You know how this works, Commander. You don't get to control your legacy. You just get to build it." At school, Zoe had been awarded the principal's leadership prize for courage and truth. During her acceptance speech, she spoke about lessons learned from her mother. "Being doubted doesn't make you wrong," Zoe said, echoing her earlier assembly speech. "My mom didn't need to prove she's brave. She taught me that being doubted is just noise. Truth stands on its own." The award came with a small scholarship fund for her future education. More importantly, it came with genuine respect from her peers and teachers. The girl who'd been mocked for telling the truth was now celebrated for her integrity. One evening, Amara and Zoe walked along the beach near their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Zoe picked up a smooth stone and threw it into the waves. "That's for them, Mom, the ones you saved." Amara smiled, picking up her own stone. "And the ones I couldn't." They stood in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, watching the ocean's endless rhythm. The weight of the past months had lightened but not disappeared. They'd both been changed by what they'd endured. "Mom?" Zoe asked softly. "Do you think it was worth it, all the trouble, everything we went through?" Amara considered the question seriously. "I wish you hadn't had to suffer for my past. I wish we could have stayed in our quiet life. But what happened taught both of us something important. We're stronger than we thought. We have people who stand with us. And the truth, no matter how hard it is always worth defending." even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. A month later, Amara received an unexpected call. The Navy wanted her to consult on a new training program for women in combat roles. Not a full return to active duty, but a chance to shape the future of special operations. She accepted, with the condition that her schedule accommodate Zoe's needs first. The Navy agreed without hesitation. On her first day as a consultant, Amara stood before a group of female recruits, young women with fire in their eyes and determination in their postures. She saw herself in them, years ago, fighting for a chance to prove what she could do. "Some of you will face people who don't believe you belong here," she told them. "They'll doubt your abilities, question your commitment, mock your ambitions. Your job isn't to convince them. Your job is to be so good they can't ignore you." The recruits hung on her every word. "And when you make it through this program, when you earn that trident, remember something. You're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing it for every girl who needs to see that impossible is just a word. Show them what's possible." That evening, back at home, Amara found Zoe in her room working on a new project. A poster board with photos and notes titled, "My Hero." "Is this for school?" Amara asked. "No, this is just for me." Zoe looked up, smiling. "I wanted to remember everything. Not just the hard parts, but the good parts too. How you never gave up, how your friends came when you needed them, how we survived together." Amara sat beside her daughter, looking at the collection of memories. Photos from the courtroom, news clippings, Zoe's award certificate, a picture of the SEAL team, saluting. "When I grow up," Zoe said quietly, "I want to wear that patch too." Amara's breath caught. "It's a hard path, baby. I know. But you taught me that hard doesn't mean impossible. You taught me that being underestimated just means they're going to be more surprised when you succeed." Amara pulled her daughter close. "Then you'll earn it your way. With truth and strength and that big, beautiful heart of yours." The following week, a private ceremony was held at the naval base. No cameras, no public attention, just a small gathering of SEALs past and present. Amara stood before them as Captain Torres presented her with a new commendation. This one for exemplary conduct under unjust scrutiny and continued service to the ideals of naval special warfare. As Torres pinned the medal to Amara's uniform, every SEAL in attendance saluted. This time, Amara returned the salute, her face composed, but her eyes bright with emotion. After the ceremony, Zoe ran to her mother, and Amara scooped her up despite her protests that she was getting too big for that. They stood together surrounded by warriors who'd become family, people who understood that strength came in many forms. That night, standing on their front porch under a sky full of stars, Amara watched Zoe chase fireflies in the yard. The girl's laughter floated through the evening air, pure and joyful, the sound of childhood reclaimed. Dana Reeves's words echoed in her mind. "You don't get to control your legacy. You just get to build it." Looking at her daughter, at the home they'd fought to keep, at the peace they'd earned through fire, Amara understood her legacy wasn't in the classified missions or the medals locked away in secure facilities. It was in the girl running through the grass, fearless and strong, carrying forward lessons of truth and courage. The journey had been brutal. The cost had been high. But standing here, whole and free with her daughter happy and safe, Amara knew they'd won something far more important than vindication. They'd won the right to be themselves, fully and unapologetically. And that was worth everything. When someone tells you a truth that challenges everything you think you know, do you have the courage to believe them, or do you side with comfortable prejudice? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us why truth and courage matter.